the government-funded Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights says at least 10 people have been killed in protests across the country on this Monday. Police reportedly opened fire and a charging crowd of protesters in the capital, Nairobi, after a tense standoff. Police were deployed across the city ahead of demonstrations to mark the 35th anniversary of the bloody Saba Saba uprising. That's when Kenyans demanded a return to democracy. DW correspondent Felix Moringa joined us earlier from Nairobi. He gave us this update.
Clouds of smoke have been witnessed in the streets of Nairobi as police and protesters clashed over the Saba Saba Day commemoration. Now, the Saba Saba Day, which in English would translate to 7/7, is the day that Kenyans remember the year 1990 in the month of July, when the opposition leaders, human rights activists, and Kenyans from all walks of life pushed the then government to move from a one-party state to a multi-party democracy. Over the years, these protests have metamorphosized into different shades, and many people, young people, the older generation, have used this day to clamor for the things or to push for the necessary things that they need in society. They've used this day to talk about unemployment. They've used this day to castigate the government about high taxes. They've also used this day to talk about police excesses. Now, in the last few weeks in the country, we have seen a wave of protests. Many young people have been killed by police. We have human rights activists who have castigated the government and the police over the heavy-handedness that they've handled the protesters with. And the protesters have continued to say that they will not leave the streets until their needs are met or until their demands are met. And some of the demands have been the government supplies the jobs that they promised. Some of other demands have been that the government stops overtaxing them. And lastly, for the parents and human rights activists in the country, they've been saying there needs to be an end to police brutality. So young people have vowed to remain on the streets until some of these demands are met.
That was DW's Felix Moringa there reporting. Former Kenyan Prime Minister and main opposition leader Raila Odinga gave a press conference earlier today in which he criticized the actions of police.
I propose that the country urgently returns to the agenda of comprehensive police reforms, focusing on enhancing accountability, transparency, and improving the police-to-people relationship. Your rogue police force that shoots people with impunity. And this is a force that we inherited from the colonialists.
For more, I'm joined now by Eric Mugendi. He is the managing editor at Africa Uncensored. That's an investigative journalism outlet. Eric, it's good to have you with us. You know, the pictures that we are seeing from Nairobi, they're certainly dramatic, to say the least. The clashes and the violence, they've been going on now for days, if not weeks. Why do we not see this unrest abating?
So first of all, the protests were a result of the previous protests that were held on the 25th of June, which was also a commemoration of protests from the previous year, which were in response to a tax bill that was being introduced by the government. So this is kind of like a cascading effect of what we're seeing as the government essentially overreacting to the people exercising their constitutional right to protest. So in response to what happened last week with the protesters trying to access the central business district, the government today, following conversations and rumors that there was going to be a lot of protest activity to mark Saba Saba, which happens to be a significant day in Kenyan history, decided to cordon off a lot of the roads leading into the central business districts to prevent a repeat of the kind of protest action that we saw last week. So it's more or less a culmination of frustrations on the part of the public in terms of the government's failure to actually deliver on what the people need and what the people are asking for, which is a reduced tax bill, as we are kind of moving into a situation where the government is overreacting and it's using the police as a way to kind of stifle the people coming out and calling for their rights to be defended and to be protected. We're seeing the kind of dramatic escalation that the protesters actually are hoping to avoid in a lot of situations end up in violent clashes and actual loss of life, as we've seen today and as we saw last week.
Eric, you said that the government is overreacting. Why are authorities using what appears to be very extreme measures here, even, sometimes fatal force?
I think at its core, it's the fact that the police are acting with the understanding that they have the authority to kill protesters on site, as was said by the cabinet minister for Interior, Kipchumba Murkomen, last week, where he said the police are now free to go out on the streets and actually if it means taking the lives of people who are taking part in this process, they have the right to act. We've got into this situation where the police are acting with, I'd say, a wanton disregard for human life, but then it is effectively sanctioned by the government. Mm-hmm. And what we're also seeing is these protests, which were previously being held inside the city center, are now moving away from the city center and into the suburbs and into towns outside of Nairobi, because we saw a lot of violence in Ngong town, which is in the outskirts of Nairobi. And we also saw a lot of the kind of violence that was happening in the city center now essentially be distributed. So the police are not acting on one specific group of protesters. They're acting on different, or they're responding to different pockets of violence within the city and in the outskirts of the city. And they're not really coming into these situations to de-escalate the situation. They are coming in and reacting with a significant amount of force. So they're acting on orders that have told them it's okay to go out and kill people. And they're also acting with the understanding that anything that they do as the police or on behalf of the government is going to be forgiven as well. So there's that kind of impunity that is characteristic of the Kenya police that we're seeing at play right now. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that no one has been held accountable for the kinds of police brutality and overreactions that we've seen over the last year, actually, since the invasion of parliament last year, and actually before that, with the finance bill and the related protests as well.
Eric Mugendi from Africa Uncensored, giving us the latest and helping to put this very volatile situation into context for us as well. Eric, thank you.
Thank you.